Good morning, everybody, and I'm very happy and I'm honored to be here today. Let me introduce myself. My name is Snezhana Zamalieva, and I'm a docent from St. Petersburg State University, Russian Federation of Florida, and I'm a clinical psychologist and a business trainer. Everyone has his unique path and unique way to become a therapist. And today I would like to share my story, how I became a therapist and how I got involved in logotherapy and existential analysis. My first degree is in sociology, and I was working for quite a long time in business. And then I decided to fulfill my dream to become a psychologist and psychotherapist. And 8 years ago I entered a double program. That was a program in psychology to get a master's degree and a program in psychoanalysis. So I was trained as a classical psychoanalyst. Actually, two approaches, classical psychoanalysis and modern psychoanalysis, which was developed by Heinrich Hornitz in the United States. So, but through all my study, I was debating inside of myself that there is something missing. Yes, I was agreeing with the concept of the unconscious, of the repressed feelings, etc., with the resistance and transparency and counter-transparency. But for me, it was something missing, like something that makes person not to be determined by circumstances. So I remember the day when we had to do lots of independent work and for psychology, and we got different subjects. And hard to believe, but I got the subject, Viktor Frankl logotherapy. Never heard, never read anything. I was thinking, okay, let's check. And in all the textbook what we had, I didn't find the subject. So given Google knows everything, I Googled, and I remember that was like 5 p.m. in the evening. I found a book on the internet, The Man's Search for Meaning. So I read it through the whole night. I couldn't stop. I had to cancel some business meetings saying that I'm sick. But I thought I have to finish the book. I really need to finish that. The more I read, the more fascinated I felt, because for me that was what I was searching for. That such a support with my thoughts against determinism. So then I said to myself, oh my God, I have to find the way to study. I tried and searched what do we have in Russia. We didn't have any program. And then, I found the institute, and I found the distance learning program. And that's how I met my dear teacher, Ann Graber. And I did all the steps of the program with her, and the last step is Edward. And Anne is not here with us today, but I know that spiritually she is here. At least that's how I feel. So then I got my master's degree in psychology, and I got a certified psychoanalyst. And then I went to St. Petersburg State University for PhD program. And in December I got my PhD, and my research, my thesis was on the human being concept, how it's seen in logotherapy and existential analysis, and how it is useful in terms of anthropological crisis nowadays, how we can use this holistic approach to find the way out of the anthropological crisis. Then my first book was published, and that's my little baby I'm very proud of. And the book, it's the first book of a Russian author on logotherapy, existential analysis, and it's on Viktor Frankl. So this is my story. And now I would like to come to start with my presentation. The Russian philosophical heritage and its impact on Franklian philosophy. So my report consists of 2 parts. The first part is attempt to describe the key aspect of Russian philosophy with the greater emphasis on the search for meaning concept. And the second part explains some of relevant issues of Russian philosophy which presumably influenced Viktor Frankl's teaching. So let us begin with the first part. What are the immediate associations that pop up when you hear Russia or Russian culture or Russian philosophy? I talked to Heidi the other day, and he said to me about Tchaikovsky, and that was such a wonderful story about Swan Lake by Tchaikovsky. And I know that many of you have St. Petersburg on the list, right? And St. Petersburg is the cultural capital of Russia. So, and of course it goes without saying, each answer regarding Russian philosophy and Russian culture would be bound to be unique and is likely to depend on one's awareness of Russia. And still the names of Pushkin, Tchaikovsky, Dostoyevsky, Turgenev, Tolstoy sound quite familiar to many of you. These names only make our culture, the Russian culture, a significant part of the world heritage. It is worth mentioning here that the national culture gains worldwide popularity only the moment when the values propagated by it receive international acclaim. From this perspective, Russian philosophy is in class of its own. Russian philosophy is something unique, and this uniqueness is based on the originality of philosophical concepts and issues characteristic of the many phenomena of Russian culture. So the understanding of the evolution of Russian philosophy in general and its religious aspect in particular is necessary to a deeper insight into the history of Russia and in the insight what is the so-called Russian soul that everyone is trying to figure out about. The key issues of Russian philosophy were those of human spirituality, faith, life and its meaning, death, freedom, responsibility, etc. And what is important to mention that Russian religious philosophy provides individual spiritual anchorage by giving attention to the world of spirit. Russian religious and philosophical anthropology has developed the idea of search for meaning of life long before, we can say, ordinary people could see the timely character of such studies. Many of them were empirically successful, talking about the research and empirical testing. Take as an example the ethical aspect of Russian anthropology, the ethics of nonviolence, what is very clearly presented in Tolstoy's work, and adherence to good, spirituality, which were reflected in the UN charters and other international legal instruments.
Excuse me, can I ask something? Why didn't you mention Dostoyevsky?
I mentioned it.
Have you?
Yeah, and I will come more to this. But think about the question. So, Nikolai Losky, the Russian philosopher, the famous philosopher, he said, and I like that quotation, Russian philosophy was bound to have a crucial impact on the human civilization. And for us today, Russian philosophy is particularly interesting for its detailed and elaborate study of search for meaning concept. Now we will speak of the uniqueness of Russian philosophy. And I would like, actually this is the huge topic, right? And I would like just give the bullet points and hyphenate the four main aspects. So the first aspect is the following. In the course of its development, Russian philosophy could not rely on the potent philosophical tradition of ancient Greece and Rome. Only some elements of the ancient tradition were adopted via Byzantine translation, because Russians, they could not read Greek and Latin. That's why there was a huge part of inheriting the tradition missing. So by comparison, the Western world managed to inherit the ready-made definitions of the ancient times. The second aspect Russian philosophy has always been faith-based. And what I mean to say is that almost all textual examples of Russian philosophical thought were based on religion. And the Weltanschauung teaching were traditionally based on Russian orthodoxy. This was a fundamental element which defined them. And very often for them, the man's life without God was a psychological and ethical disorder. Now we come to the third aspect. The key topic for Russian philosopher was Russia's destiny, and Russia's future. And that was most of the time the major and the sensitive issue for them. So the fourth aspect, no less important topic of interest, is definitely that of a human being and their predestination and search for meaning in life. As opposed to the Western approach, where human beings are treated as individualized atoms, Russian philosophy treats them as a universal, a totality, and a microcosm who holds the key to the mystery of everything macrocosmic. The us, but not the I, constitute the quick essence of a human being. So we looked at the four main aspects of Russian philosophy, and now let us look at the search for meaning as it's seen in Russian philosophy. By brooding over that issue whether life has meaning or not, the Russian philosophizing writer and philosopher Leo Tolstoy was apt to note that the matter was not in the perfect knowledge, but in some sort of belief. He said, some believe that life is senseless, others, on the contrary, do not and find it full of meaning. And today we will put a greater emphasis on the second group of philosophers who are absolutely positive about life being meaningful. Some of the many to be listed here are undoubtedly Berdyaev, the representative of so-called Christian existentialism, and Dr. Frankl quoted him several times. And the other Russian philosophers of the 19th, 20th century was Martinovsky, Frank, we had also Frank, but Simon Frank, and Bulgakov, and of course Tolstoy and Dostoyevsky. While working on the presentation, I found it very interesting to give you an example of Martinovsky's classification and the typology of people in accordance with their readiness to search for meaning in life, to reflect on this concept. And he singled out four groups of people. First group tend not to think about this difficult and worrying issue of meaning in life. The only thing they strive for is to seek oblivion, say in alcohol, drugs, nowadays we can add something else. And the second group of people are those who do their utmost to recondition their lives by outward means, through reform, revolution, evolution, and other stronger methods. They don't see any meaning whatsoever in life as it is and strive to attach to the life their own fictitious significance. The group three, they are desperate. They don't believe that there is any meaning of life, and as a result, they commit suicide. Group four are those who have succeeded in getting the sense of life and aware of its meaning and message. What I would like to highlight here and bring up again to your attention, that Martinovsky emphasizes that idea that any search for one's meaning is pointless if it's done only within the framework of one's biological or psychophysiological life. He started to develop the concept of different dimension. Now let us see what message the Russian philosopher of the 19th and 20th century were trying to communicate in terms of biological and psychophysiological aspects, or rather what is juxtaposed to them. Here we will talk a little bit about Nikolai Berdyaev and what I found very interesting, this quotation. He said, "For me, the search for truth and meaning is juxtaposed to mundanity and senseless reality. This addressed to spirit and the spiritual was pivotal. The vivid life of spirit in its integrity illuminates the life of our heart and body, filling our existence with meaning." Russian philosophers suggested several criteria. It's just in general, just to give some bullet points, which may help us define if one's life has meaning in terms of how the person is reflecting on the subject. The first point would be a person's attitude to time and the analysis of life versus death dichotomy. Second is the hierarchical structure of goals and values. The third, profuseness and completeness of the existence of those who have found and implementing the meaning of life. While brooding over life and its meaning, a human being should definitely see life as a whole, and she or he aspires after what one may call gratification. So, let me now talk a little bit about Viktor Frankl, so I can make a connection to the second part of the report, how presumably the teaching of Tolstoy and Dostoyevsky has influenced on Viktor Frankl. So, from what we could see, the Russian philosophy has a very pan-moralistic stance, and we will see that more in the presentation. And that was particularly appealing to Viktor Frankl. He referred to the highly philosophical views of Leo Tolstoy and Fyodor Dostoevsky expressed in their books. And Dr. Frankl would agree to the statement that some of his ideas and concepts seem to be in tune with Russian hearts. And in one of his articles, he stated that he was once deeply influenced by teachings of Leo Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. So here comes the question, but we will try to answer it. Why tune with Russian hearts, and why Tolstoy and Dostoevsky? Let us try and puzzle this out. While arranging the presentation, I was actually thinking that I want to have some images of Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, and then at the same time I want to combine it with a really special Russian culture. So I had found two portraits. So this is Leo Tolstoy, and the portrait is done by famous painter Lenin, and it's in St. Petersburg, in Russian Museum. So those who would visit one day St. Petersburg would see that. And Fyodor Dostoevsky portrait is in Tretyakovskaya Gallery in Moscow. So, just two images to keep in mind. The deep analysis of Tolstoy and Dostoevsky ideas enabled Viktor Frankl to set forth the principle of self-responsibility, which a person should follow when facing the tragedy of life, suffering, or searching for meaning. Everyone who is engaged in medicine, this way or the other, is bound to come in touch with an array of philosophical issues, which mostly cover various aspects of ethics and anthropology. Remember, I like the quotation of Frankl when he said that Freud, in one of his letters to Maria Bonaparte, wrote that when a man asks for a meaning, that means he's not normal, he needs to be treated. But that's why the philosophical approach is so important for us to understand that it's not a deviation to search for a meaning. This is something human in the human being. So in this respect, Viktor Frankl was one of the most consistent psychotherapists. For him to cure meant in a way to philosophize. In his opinion, the major drawback of Alfred Adler, yesterday we talked a little bit at one of the seminars about Adlerian coaching, right, and what's the difference. And here I like what Frankl said, nicely criticizing Adler's theory. So he said that author missing the organ responsible for the perception of philosophical issues. That was a criticism of Adler. Viktor Frankl himself treated the fundamentals of logotherapy as a part of broader philosophical context. This fact broadened his adhesiveness, which allowed him to conceptualize the human being concept at a larger scale. Working on the basic of logotherapy, Dr. Frankl did take into consideration, as we already started to talk about, some aspects of Russian philosophy. As I have already mentioned, he was particularly interested in Tolstoy and Dostoyevsky, and Tolstoy and Dostoyevsky were gaining popularity in Europe toward the end of 19th century. And if you would ask why, because this end of 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, the philosophical, anthropological crisis was flourishing, and the question, who is the human being? What is the concept of human being? And the ideas of Tolstoy and Dostoevsky were very useful. They helped to look at the concept of the human being as something different to implement the beginning of holistic approach. So the European philosophers, as I said, of that time were in a way trying to find the solution to this crisis, anthropological crisis, and it was Dostoyevsky and Tolstoy who managed to look at the human being differently, instigating the so-called search for a person in a human being. So, as we already know, and I would like to repeat that, Dr. Frankl himself would agree to the fact that some of his ideas were in a way in tune with Russian concept of soul, and in one of his articles, he stated that he was once deeply influenced by the creation of such authors as Dostoyevsky and Tolstoy, and that he resorted to them regularly, quoting them in his papers. Frankl's keen interest in Dostoyevsky can be easily explained, and you probably would be surprised that they have a mutual experience. Viktor Frankl in concentration camp, and Dostoyevsky in another camp. And again, coming back to your story about the torture, the mental torture, about this fake execution, that's what Dostoyevsky has experienced also. And he experienced it, and a friend of his who had experienced also this fake execution, how they prepared them, they were about to be executed, his psyche was not able to cope with that, and he became sick. But what I would like to share with you, and that was not in my presentation, it just occurred to me, that in his beautiful novel, Idiot, Dostoyevsky, in the beginning of this novel, Dostoyevsky, using the Count Meshkin, explains and provides us with the feeling how precious life is. And he puts that story of fake execution and what the person felt in his novel, and for those who would have an opportunity to read. I think this part is also very useful even in a clinical approach, because it's also meaningful and really strong, the same as the death of Ivan Ilyich, which was very often quoted by Viktor Frankl. So, as I said, Frankl's keen interest in Dostoyevsky can be easily explained by the mutual prison camp experience. To prove this, I would like resort to the following quotation from The House of the Dead by Dostoyevsky and Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I would like to remind you that Dostoyevsky was born in 1821 and he died 1881. So that's what Dostoyevsky is writing in his work, The House of Death. It's how he is talking about his experience in the camp. Our prison was at the end of the citadel, behind the ramparts. Beyond this, there are light and liberty, the life of free people. Beyond the palisade, one thought of the marvelous world, fantastic as a fairy tale. It was not the same on our side. Here, there was no resemblance to anything. Habits, customs, laws were all precisely fixed. It was the house of living death. Viktor Frankl, years after, with the progressive dawn, the outlines of an immense camp became visible. My imagination led me to see galloped with people standing on them. I was horrified, but this was just as well because step by step we had to become accustomed to a terrible and immense horror. Each section of prisoners had a different costume. The uniform of one was a cloth vest, half brown and half gray, and trousers with one leg brown, the other gray. Their heads too were shaped in different styles. The crown was bared sometimes longitudinally, sometimes latitudinally, from the nape of the neck to the forehead, or from one ear to another. Next we were herded into another room to be shaved, Frankl was writing. Not only our heads were shorn, but not a hair was left on our entire bodies. Then on to the showers, where we lined up again. We hardly recognized each other, but with great relief some people noted that the real water dripped from the sprays. While we were waiting for the shower, our nakedness was brought home to us. We really had nothing now except our bare bodies, even minus hair. All we possessed, literally, was our naked existence. I cannot now understand how I lived there for 10 entire years, stating Dostoyevsky. 4 hours at least passed before everyone was asleep, and until then there was a tumult and uproar of laughter, oaths, rattling of chains, a poisonous vapor of thick smoke, a confusion of shaved heads, stigmatized foreheads, and wretched clothes distinguishably filthy. Yes, man is a pliable animal. He must be so refined, a being who gets accustomed to everything. That would be perhaps the best definition that could be given of him. What is Frankl writing? I would like to mention a few similar surprises on how much we could endure. We had to wear the same shirts for half a year until they had lost all appearance of being shirts. For days we were unable to wash, even partially because of the frozen water pipes, and yet the sores and abrasions on hands, which were dirty from work in the soil, did not suppurate. That is, unless there was frostbite. If someone now asked of us the truth of Dostoyevsky's statement that flatly defines man as a being who can get used to anything, we would reply, yes, a man can get used to anything, but don't ask us how, said Frankl. For Dostoyevsky, to find a person in a human being was not to portray him as some sort of the inanimate mechanism, or let's say a piano key played by someone else, but as a being with an inner source of energy, movement, and life who is able to differentiate between good and evil. That is why Dostoyevsky maintained the idea that in the long run, one is responsible for his or her deeds and action, even in the dire straits. Dr. Frankl learned most important lesson Dostoyevsky taught him, that is how to remain a human being when you may think that life is seeping out of you, when you see no sense whatsoever in your existence. The Russian author linked the solution of the question of meaning in life with the private ethics with the moral consciousness, and that's what is important, and that's what Dr. Frankl integrated in his theory, the same like Schiller's concept of the human concept, and then he reworked on it. And the same as here, the question of search for meaning is always linked with the moral consciousness. Without that, it's not possible. Dostoyevsky defines the problem as follows: is there any sense in my existence, or can I be born into this world only to finally be sent to jail, or is all my life nothing but cheating? Dostoyevsky does understand that this question presupposes no different answer. Both positive and negative answers are equally possible. Any person of high moral character and integrity should endeavor and evaluate his or her own life, seeking support in positive examples, which are achieved by positive means. In his books, Dostoyevsky favors the idea that social order, which is based on blood and suffering of innocent people, possesses neither sense nor value. On the one hand, what is the human being for Dostoyevsky? And that's what was important for Dr. Frankl, and he was reflecting on that. On one hand, human beings are seen by Dostoyevsky as creatures who get used to everything with ease, and we saw that in the previous slides. And he can get to everything, to being cornered, to be deprived of will and goals. And on the other hand, they have so-called underground. What is, it's not like unconscious, it's something hidden in the person, what is manifesting their freedom, wishes, assertiveness, and spirit. So we can call that underground. This is the translation from Russian, this definition of Dostoyevsky. Frankl could not but admire this approach toward the human nature. When in concentration camp, he came to the conclusion similar to that of Dostoyevsky: a person stops to appreciate himself and turns into a number, no matter dead or alive. I'm checking my time now, 32 minutes, that's why I will just go through a few slides, and I would now focus on Tolstoy. And let me to remind you that Tolstoy was born in 1828 and he died in 1910. So, but favoring a personalized approach to faith, Frankl relied on Tolstoy and his religious speculation concerning the question of loss of meaning. He himself mentioned this fact in one of his books and interviews, and I like it. That's why I put it, and I would like to remind you to read it. I had gone to address the prisoners at St. Quentin prison at the request of the prison's director. When I finished, one stood up and asked if I would say a few words of Aaron Mitchell, who was to be executed in a few days. It was a challenge I had to accept, so I told Mr. Mitchell the story is that it's laid down in Leo Tolstoy's novel, The Death of Ivan Ilyich. As you remember, the tale of a man about 60 years old who suddenly learns that he is to die in a couple of days. But by the insight he gains, not only in facing death, but also in confronting the fact that he has wasted his life, that his life has been virtually meaningless, by this insight he rises above himself, he grows beyond himself, and thereby finally becomes capable retroactively of flooding his life with infinite meaning. And what is important, most of us, we know Tolstoy by Peace and War, Anna Karenina, but today I would like to tell you a little bit about Tolstoy's hobby horse, that was a search for meaning. And an amazing work of Tolstoy is A Confession. It's like Augustine had a confession, and that's the book of Tolstoy. a confession. In his desire to understand his meaning of life, his, as Stephen Covey would say, life mission, Tolstoy comes to the conclusion that science and knowledge provides no answer to the question of the meaning. According to Tolstoy, only life itself and people around him can do it. So he found that for the people of his class, and he was in the upper class, there were 4 means of escaping the terrible situation in which we all find ourselves, this meaningless situation. The first means of escape, writing Tolstoy, is that of ignorance. And that's what we can find even nowadays. He is writing, for the most part, people in this category are women, or they are very young or very stupid men. They still have not understood the problem of life that presented itself to Schopenhauer, Solomon, and the Buddha. The second escape, so that's how he is processing on that question, the meaninglessness. The second escape is that of Epicureanism. These people are fully aware of the hopelessness of life. They enjoy for the present the blessing that we do have, and as Tolstoy remarked, the nature of this escape lies in licking the honey as best we can, especially in those places where there is the most honey on the bush. The third means of escape for Tolstoy in his analysis is through strength and energy. It consists of destroying life once one has realized that life is evil and meaningless. He is writing, there are more and more people of our class who are acting in this way. The fourth means of escape is that of weakness. It consists of continuing to drag out a life that is evil and meaningless, knowing beforehand that nothing can come out of it. So, knowing Tolstoy, it was natural for him that he was not, of course, satisfied with all these escapes. And so he starts to look narrowly at the way ordinary people live. All these millions, as he wrote. And here he discovers that he could have fallen into such a ridiculous state of error as to think that his life and the life of a Solomon or a Schopenhauer was the true normal life, while the life of millions of others were not worthy of consideration. And then he regrets about having been led away by intellectual pride. That was why it never once occurred to him to ask, what sort of meaning do the millions in the world who have lived and who now live ascribe to their lives? So it was very much like they had some sort of irrational knowledge, and Tolstoy was wondering what kind of knowledge of meaning of life they can have. And here Tolstoy sees the lie. This irrational knowledge is faith, which gives us power to live. This faith is absolutely different from what the Church teaches us. It is free of dogma, free of rituals. It denies the Holy Trinity and the Christ divinity. Its domain in man's feelings and its personal will rather than rational thinking. This is how Tolstoy explicates the creed of this new all-human religion, and that's why the Russian Orthodox Church declined him. So Tolstoy wrote, I believe in God, whom I understand as spirit, as love, as source of all. I believe that He is in me and I am in Him. I believe that the will of God is most clearly and intelligibly expressed in the teaching of the man Jesus, whom to consider as a God and pray to, I esteem the greatest blasphemy. I believe that man's true welfare lies in fulfilling God's will, and His will is that men should love one another and should consequently do to others as they wish others to do to them, of which it is said in the Gospels that this is the law and the prophets. Summing up Tolstoy's approach to religion, I would like to point out that the tragedy of man's existence is necessitated by the loss of meaning. That's how Tolstoy saw that in the late 19th. The only way out of this state can be found through faith. This faith is set out in the teaching of Christ, and the teaching which fills man life with meaning and love. After a comprehensive analysis of Tolstoy's papers on religion, Frankl fully agrees with the great Russian novelist, but for one exception. He does not consider Christianity a primary and ultimate basis for the search for meaning. And I like how he says that for the very moment you stop being a Christian, suffering becomes senseless. And then Frank said, I cannot go that far with them. So thereby he distanced himself from Tolstoy, as well from Dostoyevsky, as well as we know from Max Scheler when he was working on the value system, and supporting the thesis that pure faith with no reasoning and will to meaning gives no freedom from suffering. It does not strengthen man's spirit either when he wants to seek for meaning. Frankl's critical stance can well be verbalized as follows. Faith is death without will to meaning, as contrast of the Christian maxim according to which faith is death without deeds. So Frankl's inner monologue with Leo Tolstoy resulted in the revision of the views of man's nature. Originally, as we could see, Dr. Frankl takes sides with Dostoyevsky and believes that the human being is a creature that conforms to everything. But later, a comprehensive analysis of Tolstoy's text made him come to the conclusion that a human being is a deciding being. Man decides for himself. So man himself takes responsibility for his own existence and self-assertiveness in life. And this message makes Frankl's logotherapy, in my eyes, anthropologically complete. Well, the 40 minutes are almost gone. Actually, it's 42 minutes. And let's summarize what I presented today. We looked at the four main aspects of Russian philosophy. We emphasized the specific of search for meaning concept in Russian philosophy, and we went through that points and ideas of Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, which were useful for Dr. Frankl when he was working on the theory of logotherapy and existential analysis. And now, once again, let me thank you, and it was really great pleasure for me, and I'm very honored to be here today, and you were wonderful ideas. Thank you very much.
I would like to say from the back row here that all of us, from whatever country we are from in this room, consider it a great honor to have you here with us.
Thank you.